She grew up in a small town where music was a part of life, but only as a background hum in people's daily routines. From a very young age, she felt a deep connection with the piano. The first time her fingers touched the cold, ivory keys in her living room, she felt a thrill that was impossible to describe. There was something about the sound that made her heart beat faster, something that made her feel alive in a way nothing else could. Her family wasn't rich, and they could not afford fancy lessons or instruments, but she never let that stop her. She played whenever she could, sneaking into the living room early in the morning and staying up late at night, practicing in secret while the house was asleep. She was not a prodigy in the traditional sense. Her technique was raw, her notes were sometimes off, and her timing could be clumsy. But there was something in her playing that was different. Every time she touched the piano, she poured her emotions into it. It wasn't about perfection. It was about expression. When she played, she spoke without words, and she could tell that even her small audience, her younger sibling or her parents, felt it. They often stopped what they were doing to listen, enchanted by the passion she put into every note. Word of her talent spread slowly in her town. People in the local community started noticing the girl who could play a tune and make it feel like a story unfolding before their eyes. They would gather in small rooms or community halls to watch her perform. Even though she was young and inexperienced, her music had an honesty that was hard to ignore. She loved it when people smiled, when they whispered to each other about how touching her music was. But she loved it even more when she played alone, when the piano and her emotions were the only things in the room. One day, she heard about a famous pianist coming to her city for a masterclass. This pianist was renowned all over the world, a person whose name inspired awe and admiration. People talked about his flawless technique, his perfect compositions, and his incredible stage presence. She knew it was impossible to meet him, but she could not stop herself from imagining what it would be like to play for someone of his caliber. It was a dream she could hardly believe, but it was a dream she wanted to pursue. When the day of the masterclass arrived, she felt a mixture of excitement and fear. The hall was large, filled with students and enthusiasts from every corner of the region. The air smelled of polished wood and fresh music sheets. She found a seat at the back, clutching her notebook with her compositions and her favorite sheet music. She watched as the famous pianist entered the room, and for the first time, she felt the intimidating weight of greatness. He had a presence that made the air feel heavy, a quiet confidence that commanded attention without a word. He moved around the room, giving pointers to students and playing pieces that sounded effortless and perfect. When it came time for her turn, her hands trembled. She carried herself to the piano, her heart thudding so loudly she feared it might echo throughout the hall. She glanced at the pianist, who gave her a polite but somewhat dismissive nod. She felt a flash of doubt. Perhaps she was not good enough. Perhaps her playing was too simple, too rough, too inexperienced. But she remembered the countless nights she had spent at the piano, the hours when she had closed her eyes and let her fingers speak what her heart could not. She took a deep breath and sat down. As her fingers touched the keys, she tried to steady her nerves. She started with a piece she had been practicing for months, one that she loved not for its complexity, but for the way it allowed her to express herself. The first few notes were shaky, almost timid, but soon she felt the music flow through her. She closed her eyes, forgetting the room, the audience, and even the famous pianist. She was lost in her music, in the story she was telling through the piano. Every crescendo and soft note was a part of her, and for a moment it felt like the piano and she were one. Then came a sudden interruption. A chuckle, low and dismissive, echoed from the front of the hall. She opened her eyes to see the famous pianist smiling, but not in admiration. There was a hint of mockery in his gaze. He had expected something refined, perfect, and polished, and what he saw was a raw, emotional performance that didn't fit into his standards. For a moment, she froze. The laughter seemed to echo louder than her own playing. She felt the weight of all her insecurities pressing down on her, threatening to pull her confidence into the shadows. But then something shifted. She remembered why she played the piano. She didn't play for applause or approval. She played because it was a part of her, because it was the only way she knew how to speak the words she could not say. Her hands began to move again, this time with even more conviction. Each note was a defiance, a statement that she would not be diminished by someone else's laughter. She poured her soul into the music, letting the rawness of her talent shine through. She did not aim for perfection. She aimed for truth. By the end of her performance, the room was silent. People who had come expecting a typical demonstration of skill were now staring in awe. The famous pianist's expression had changed from amusement to something more complex, perhaps surprise, perhaps even respect. She didn't wait for his reaction, though. She knew that her journey was about more than a single person's approval. She had faced doubt, fear, and ridicule, and she had continued to play. That was victory enough. After the masterclass, she left with her head held high, though her heart still raced from the intensity of the experience. She walked through the city streets, the evening light casting long shadows, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She realized that this moment, as humbling as it was, had taught her something invaluable. Talent alone was not enough. Resilience, passion, and the courage to continue despite criticism were what made a true artist. She had been laughed at, yes, but she had also played and left a mark, however small, on the hearts of those who had listened. That night, she sat at her piano in her own quiet room, the echoes of the day still alive in her mind. She played again, not for anyone, not to prove anything, but simply to feel the music flow through her. Each note was a reminder that she was capable, that she had a voice that mattered, and that no amount of ridicule could ever take that away. She smiled, tired but determined, knowing that this was only the beginning of her journey. The laughter had not defeated her, it had awakened her. She would keep playing, keep learning, and one day, she would change everything, not because someone else believed in her, but because she believed in herself. After the experience at the masterclass, she returned home with a mixture of emotions swirling inside her. The laughter of the famous pianist still echoed in her mind, but so did the quiet pride she felt from finishing her performance. She knew that if she wanted to grow, she had to keep working, no matter how daunting it seemed. Her piano, old and slightly worn, had never felt more alive beneath her fingers. Every key she pressed reminded her of the promise she had made to herself, to never give up on the music that had become a part of her soul. Her days became filled with practice in a way they never had before. She woke up early, before the sun touched the rooftops of her small town, and played in the soft morning light. The notes floated through the empty house, weaving themselves into the quiet rooms, a private symphony that only she could hear. Even when her hands ached and her back tired, she did not stop. She repeated scales, practiced arpeggios, and tried the pieces that had seemed impossible before. Sometimes the music felt effortless, and other times it was a struggle that made her want to give up. But each challenge only deepened her resolve. She experimented with her style, exploring rhythms and melodies that were not in her sheet music. She improvised, letting her imagination run wild, allowing her feelings to shape the music rather than just following notes on a page. Her piano became a friend and a teacher at the same time, teaching her patience, discipline, and the power of persistence. There were moments when she felt frustrated, when a particular passage would refuse to sound right no matter how many times she tried. She would slam her hands on the keys in anger, only to take a deep breath and start again. Each mistake became a lesson, each failure a stepping stone toward improvement. Her family noticed the change in her. Her parents were supportive, but they worried about the intensity of her focus. They watched as she spent hours at the piano, often forgetting meals or the passage of time. Her younger sibling would sometimes peek into the room, curious about the music that filled the air, and then quietly retreat when they saw the determination in her eyes. Despite the solitude and the challenges, she never felt lonely when she was at the piano. It was a world where she could be herself, where her emotions had a voice, and where her dreams could start to take shape. School life continued alongside her music. She was often tired from late-night practice, and her friends sometimes teased her for being so serious about something that seemed like just a hobby to them. They did not understand that for her, Music was life itself. She felt a quiet separation from them, a sense that her path was different. But this did not bother her as much as she expected. She was learning something they could not see yet, resilience. She was building the strength to face criticism, to face doubt, and to continue moving forward no matter what obstacles came her way. There were days when she questioned herself. She remembered the laughter from the masterclass and wondered if she would ever be good enough to impress someone of that caliber. At times, the self-doubt was overwhelming, threatening to crush the small flame of confidence she had nurtured. She would sit at her piano, hands hovering over the keys, staring at the music sheets as tears threatened to fall. But then she would play, slowly at first, letting the sound fill her chest and lift her spirit. The music reminded her why she had started, why she had chosen this difficult and uncertain path. She had a voice and it mattered. As the months went by, her skill began to grow in subtle ways. Her fingers became faster and more precise, her timing more consistent, and her ability to express emotion through the keys deepened. She recorded herself sometimes, listening critically to each performance, noticing mistakes she had never recognized before. She sought out small opportunities to perform locally, at school events, community gatherings, and family occasions. Each performance, no matter how small, was a chance to learn and to build her confidence. The applause, smiles, and encouraging words from those who listened became fuel for her journey. She also started to learn from others. She read books about great musicians, watched videos of performances, and absorbed every lesson she could find. Sometimes she tried to imitate techniques, other times she used them as inspiration to develop her own style. She understood that her journey was unique, and that while learning from others was important, she could not lose her voice in the process. Her music had to remain true to her feelings, her story, and her personality. Even with progress, the struggle remained. There were pieces that seemed impossible, passages where her fingers would fumble, and moments when her confidence wavered. She learned to embrace these struggles rather than fear them. Each difficulty was an opportunity to grow, to understand herself better, and to become stronger not just as a pianist but as a person. She began to see that talent was not just about natural ability, but about endurance, patience, and the willingness to face failure head-on. Her commitment began to attract attention. Teachers noticed her dedication and offered guidance whenever possible. Neighbors and local musicians admired her perseverance. She started forming connections with people who shared her passion for music, exchanging ideas and learning from each other. These connections, although small, made her feel part of a larger world where music mattered and where her dreams could eventually flourish. There were quiet victories along the way that no one else might notice, but that mattered greatly to her. A passage that once felt impossible became fluid. A piece she had struggled with for weeks began to sound beautiful. Her fingers learned to move with confidence, but more importantly, her heart learned to trust in her abilities. Every small improvement was a reminder that effort mattered more than talent alone. Every time she overcame a challenge, she grew not just as a musician, but as a person who understood the value of persistence, courage, and belief in oneself. The more she practiced, the more her own style emerged. It was not about mimicking others or seeking approval. Her music became a reflection of her life, her struggles, her joys, and her sorrows. She learned to embrace imperfection, to see beauty in the raw and unpolished moments, and to let her emotions guide her. Her playing had depth, honesty, and a unique voice that could touch hearts even when it was not perfect. Despite the long hours, the challenges, and the occasional doubts, she never wavered in her commitment. The laughter from the famous pianist had left a mark, but it was not a wound. It was a challenge. It was a spark that lit a fire inside her, pushing her to work harder, feel deeper, and strive further. She learned that the journey itself was as important as any recognition or applause. Every struggle, every late night, every tiny victory was shaping her into the musician and person she was becoming. As the year passed, she felt herself changing in ways that were invisible to others but profound to her. She was stronger, more confident, and more connected to her music than ever before. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a mirror of her soul, a companion in her journey, and a testament to her resilience. She knew that one day, the hard work, the silent practice, and the perseverance would lead her to a moment where she could show the world what she was truly capable of. She was ready to face that moment when it came, and she was determined to let her music speak louder than any doubt or laughter ever could. After months of practicing tirelessly, she began to feel a sense of readiness she had never known before. The countless hours at the piano, the small victories, and the moments of doubt had all shaped her into a musician who understood not only the notes but the emotions behind them. One day, an opportunity arrived almost unexpectedly. A chance to perform at a local music festival. It wasn't a grand stage like she had imagined in her dreams, but it was real, tangible, and it mattered. She knew this was her moment to step out of her private world and show her music to others again, with courage and conviction. She spent days preparing for the festival. Unlike previous performances, this time she wanted to take a risk. She chose a piece that was both technically challenging and emotionally deep, one that could fully express her journey and growth. She practiced each section meticulously, analyzing every note, every chord, every pause. Her hands moved with precision, but her heart led the expression. She understood that the music had to feel alive, not just perfect on paper. Every time she played, she imagined the audience in front of her, listening not just to the notes, but to the story she was telling. Her preparation also involved mental training. She visualized herself on the stage, imagining the room filled with people, the lights shining, and the piano waiting for her touch. She imagined the nervousness, the pressure, and then she imagined herself overcoming it. She spoke to herself quietly, reassuring herself that she had grown, that she had learned from every struggle, and that she was ready. The famous pianist's laughter from the past lingered at times, but she used it not as a weight, but as fuel. She reminded herself that she had turned that moment of ridicule into determination, and now she could take it further. The day of the festival arrived, and she felt a nervous excitement she hadn't felt in months. The venue was small but welcoming, with a stage that looked simple but inviting. People filled the seats, their faces reflecting curiosity and anticipation. She could hear whispers about the performers, some excited, some indifferent. She carried herself to the piano, feeling the cool wood under her hands and the familiar keys ready to respond. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and let her fingers rest lightly on the keys. As she began to play, a hush fell over the room. The first notes were delicate, almost hesitant, but quickly gained confidence. The music flowed from her, weaving a story of struggle, persistence, and hope. She played with a freedom she had never felt before, letting each emotion guide her, letting each note carry her past, her dreams, and her growth. The audience was captivated. Some leaned forward, listening intently, while others closed their eyes, letting the music speak to them. She could feel a connection, a silent conversation between her and everyone in the room. She encountered moments that challenged her. The rapid passages, the complex chords, but this time, she did not falter. She had practiced tirelessly, learned from her mistakes, and built the strength to face pressure. Each obstacle became a chance to shine, and her determination transformed the difficulties into expressions of skill and emotion. Her music had a voice that was uniquely hers, and it resonated deeply. Even without a grand stage or an illustrious audience, she felt the weight and the joy of achievement with every note. As the performance continued, she noticed the audience's reactions. Smiles appeared on faces, eyes widened, and some nodded in appreciation. The energy in the room shifted. What had started as curiosity turned into admiration. She realized that music could touch hearts regardless of status, fame, or grandeur. Her connection with the listeners was authentic and powerful. She felt a sense of fulfillment that surpassed any expectation. The applause that came at the end was warm and genuine, not just for technical skill, but for the honesty of her performance. After her performance, she stepped off the stage and felt a mix of relief, pride, and excitement. People approached her, offering kind words, questions, and praise. Local musicians, teachers, and even strangers acknowledged her talent. They spoke about the emotions she had conveyed, the depth of her expression, and the courage she had shown in performing a challenging piece. She felt recognized, not in the way of fame or fortune, but in a way that mattered deeply to her. Her music had touched lives, and her hard work had been validated. Among the audience was a visitor she had not expected, the famous pianist. He had come to the festival, curious to see the rising talent that had made an impression on him months ago. She noticed him watching quietly, his expression unreadable at first. Then, as the last notes faded, she saw a change. There was a look of genuine surprise and respect. He approached her after the performance, offering words of acknowledgement. He spoke not of perfection or comparison, but of growth, resilience, and authenticity. His reaction was a reminder that recognition, when it comes, is not about imitation, but about embracing one's own journey and strengths. That evening, she returned home with her heart full of pride and inspiration. She reflected on the journey she had taken, the nights of practice, the struggles, the small victories, and the moments of doubt. She realized that the turning point had not been the applause, the recognition, or even the famous pianist's praise. The true turning point had been the decision to face her fears, to embrace the challenge, and to let her music speak with honesty and courage. She understood that growth comes not from comfort, but from taking risks and trusting in oneself. She played at her piano again that night, not for anyone else, but for herself. The keys felt familiar and comforting, yet vibrant and alive. She experimented with new variations, explored deeper emotions, and allowed herself to feel the music as it flowed. Every note reminded her of her journey, every chord echoed her determination, and every melody carried her dreams. She felt more connected to her music than ever before, understanding that her voice, her story, and her expression were powerful tools that could inspire and touch others. From that day on, her perspective on music and life shifted. She learned that moments of challenge and risk were not to be feared but embraced. She realized that every performance, every practice session, and every moment of doubt contributed to her growth. She became more confident in her abilities, more willing to explore, and more open to sharing her music with the world. The turning point had shown her that talent alone was not enough. It was courage, perseverance, and authenticity that truly mattered. The festival became a memory she would cherish forever, not for the applause, but for the proof it gave her of what she could achieve when she faced her fears. It was a moment where preparation met opportunity, where determination met expression, and where her music reached hearts in a way she had only dreamed of. She walked away with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to embrace even greater challenges, knowing that each step she took would bring her closer to realizing her full potential as a musician and as a person. The day of the big performance arrived, the moment she had been preparing for her entire life. She felt a mixture of excitement and nerves, a sensation that made her pulse quicken and her hands tingle. The hall was grander than anything she had ever seen, with rows of seats that stretched far and wide, lights that sparkled from above, and an audience that seemed endless. She had imagined this day countless times, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality. The piano sat at the center of the stage, gleaming under the spotlight, its keys waiting for her touch. As she stepped onto the stage, she felt the weight of the audience's expectations. There were people who had come to see her because of whispers about her talent, and some who had never heard of her before. She saw familiar faces and strangers, parents, teachers, fellow musicians, and critics. Among them, she noticed a presence that made her pause for a brief second. The famous pianist who had laughed at her months ago. He sat quietly, observing, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. But she quickly reminded herself that she was no longer the same girl who had trembled at his laughter. She had grown, she had learned, and she had prepared. This was her moment to show the world, and more importantly, to show herself what she was truly capable of. She sat at the piano, feeling the smooth keys beneath her fingers. The audience fell silent, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes were clear and precise, carrying a confidence she had not felt before. But it wasn't just precision. It was passion, emotion, and a story that flowed from her heart into her fingers. Each note told of her journey, her struggles, her late nights of practice, her doubts, and her determination to keep going despite obstacles. As she played, the audience was captivated. Some leaned forward, their eyes fixed on her hands moving effortlessly across the keys. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, feeling every emotion she poured into it. The hall seemed to disappear, leaving only her, the piano, and the music that filled the air. She played with abandon, letting the music guide her, letting every emotion, joy, fear, hope, and triumph, be heard in every note. There were moments of intensity where her fingers moved faster than ever, executing challenging passages that once seemed impossible. The technical mastery she had worked so hard to achieve was now apparent, but it was the emotion that truly moved the audience. She played not to impress, but to communicate, to connect, to share the depth of her soul. The music rose and fell, danced and whispered, telling a story that words could never capture. She felt a sense of freedom and fulfillment unlike anything she had experienced. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was an extension of herself, a voice through which she could express everything she felt. She could feel the energy of the room shifting. The initial curiosity and anticipation transformed into admiration and awe. People were moved, some visibly so, by the intensity and honesty of her performance. She sensed the impact of her music, how it reached beyond technical skill to touch hearts and stir emotions. Even the famous pianist's expression had changed. Gone was the smirk, replaced with a thoughtful, almost reverent gaze. She did not seek his approval, but the recognition in his eyes was a quiet acknowledgement of her growth, her talent, and her courage. As the performance neared its climax, she poured every ounce of herself into the music. Her fingers danced over the keys, producing sounds that were both powerful and delicate. She felt her heart and mind in perfect sync, each note a reflection of her journey. The audience was completely absorbed, held captive by the story she told without words. When the final note lingered in the air and faded into silence, there was a moment of stillness, as if the world itself was holding its breath, honoring the music that had filled the hall. Then came the applause, slowly at first, then swelling into a wave of clapping and cheers. Standing ovation after standing ovation filled the room. People were moved not only by her skill, but by the passion, courage, and authenticity that had guided her performance. She felt a rush of emotion, tears welling in her eyes as she realized the magnitude of what she had accomplished. Every struggle, every moment of doubt, every long night of practice had led to this moment. She had not just played the piano. She had shared her heart, her story, and her triumph. After the performance, people approached her, offering congratulations, praise, and heartfelt words. Musicians spoke of the depth and originality of her playing. Teachers admired her technique and dedication, and audience members shared how moved they were by her music. Even critics who had come with a discerning eye acknowledged the emotional impact of her performance. She felt a sense of fulfillment that was deeper than any recognition or reward. It was the knowledge that she had done her best, expressed her truth, and connected with others in a profound way. The famous pianist approached her quietly, his presence commanding attention without a word. He extended a hand and spoke, not with condescension, but with respect. He acknowledged her growth, her resilience, and her ability to convey emotion through her music. His words were not empty praise. They were a recognition of the journey she had undertaken and the courage she had shown. She felt a sense of closure, not because she needed validation, but because the moment marked the transformation from doubt to triumph, from uncertainty to confidence. That night, she returned home, exhausted but exhilarated. She sat at her piano once more, letting the music flow freely, experimenting with new melodies and variations. The performance had changed her, but the music remained her sanctuary, her voice, and her constant companion. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the struggles, the ridicule, the relentless practice, and the moments of doubt. Each experience had shaped her, prepared her, and strengthened her. The applause and recognition were meaningful, but the true triumph was in her growth, her perseverance, and her unwavering dedication to her passion. She realized that this moment was not the end, but a milestone in a lifelong journey. Music was her calling, her purpose, and her way of touching lives. She understood that every challenge she faced would continue to shape her, every risk she took would teach her something new, and every performance would be an opportunity to connect, inspire, and grow. The journey had taught her that true triumph is not measured solely by applause or recognition, but by the courage to pursue one's passion, the resilience to overcome obstacles, and the authenticity to express oneself fully. In the weeks and months that followed, the impact of her performance lingered. Invitations to perform in new venues, opportunities to collaborate with other musicians, and the admiration of those who had witnessed her talent began to shape a new chapter in her life. She approached each new opportunity with humility, dedication, and the same passion that had carried her through countless hours of practice. The moment of triumph had given her confidence, but it had also instilled a deeper understanding of responsibility, to honor her music, to continue learning, and to inspire others through her journey. As she sat at her piano in quiet moments, she reflected on how far she had come. The laughter of the famous pianist, which had once felt like a crushing blow, now seemed like a spark that had ignited her determination. Every struggle, every sleepless night, and every moment of doubt had contributed to the musician she had become. She had learned that perseverance, courage, and authenticity were far more valuable than fleeting approval or validation. Her music had grown with her, evolving into a voice that could inspire, comfort, and move others. The performance had been a turning point, not just for her career, but for her understanding of herself. She had discovered her strength, her resilience, and the depth of her passion. She had faced fear and doubt head-on and emerged victorious, not through luck, but through unwavering dedication and belief in herself. The moment of triumph was a celebration of her journey, a testament to the power of perseverance, and a reminder that every challenge, no matter how daunting, could be overcome with courage and determination. After her triumphant performance, life began to change in ways she had only dreamed of. Invitations to perform at various events, both large and small, started arriving. She received opportunities to collaborate with other musicians and to participate in workshops where she could share her passion and skills. But despite the recognition and the growing excitement around her music, she remained grounded. She understood that success was not just about applause or fame, but about staying true to herself and continuing the journey she had started long ago at the old piano in her living room. She took the time to mentor younger musicians, sharing her story and her experiences with those who were just beginning their own paths. She remembered how discouraging it had been to face criticism and doubt, and she wanted to provide guidance and encouragement to others who might be struggling. She would tell them about perseverance, the importance of expressing themselves honestly, and the value of hard work over shortcuts. She emphasized that talent was just the beginning and that dedication and resilience were what transformed a passion into achievement. As she traveled and performed, she noticed the impact her music had on people. Some came up to her after performances, eyes bright with emotion, sharing how her music had inspired them to follow their own dreams. Others confessed that her story gave them courage to keep going despite difficulties. She realized that her journey, once private and personal, was now touching lives and motivating others. It was a powerful feeling, knowing that what had once been her way of expressing herself alone had become a source of inspiration for many. She also reconnected with the famous pianist who had once laughed at her performance. Their interactions were different now, no longer based on judgment or skepticism. He offered advice and shared his experiences, recognizing her growth and determination. His presence no longer intimidated her. Instead, it was a reminder of how far she had come. She realized that even moments of ridicule or doubt could become turning points if met with perseverance and self-belief. Her music continued to evolve, growing deeper and more expressive with each performance. She experimented with new compositions, blending different styles and exploring emotions she had not yet shared through her playing. Audiences were captivated by the authenticity of her music, by the way she could convey joy, sorrow, hope, and resilience in a single piece. She found that her story was not only in the notes she played, but also in the way she interpreted music, allowing her personality and journey to shine through. Despite the accolades and opportunities, she never lost sight of the person she had been when she first sat at her piano, uncertain and unpolished but full of passion. She kept her practice sessions sacred, understanding that mastery required constant effort and self-reflection. The discipline she had cultivated over the years became a foundation that supported her growth and allowed her to remain authentic, even in the face of growing recognition and expectations. Through it all, she discovered a deeper truth about success and fulfillment. It was not about competing with others or meeting someone else's standards. It was about challenging herself, expressing her unique voice, and remaining committed to her passion. Every performance, every new opportunity, was a chance to grow, to learn, and to touch hearts. She embraced these experiences with humility and gratitude, knowing that each step of her journey had value and purpose. Her influence extended beyond music as well. People admired her resilience, her ability to turn challenges into opportunities, and her dedication to pursuing her dreams despite obstacles. She became a symbol of perseverance, showing that talent alone was not enough, and that the courage to face fear, doubt, and criticism could lead to extraordinary growth. Her story encouraged others to embrace their passions fully, to work tirelessly, and to believe in themselves even when the world seemed doubtful. She often reflected on her journey, from the timid girl who had been laughed at to the musician who now inspired others. Every challenge she had faced, every late night of practice, and every moment of self-doubt had contributed to her growth. The laughter that once felt like a blow had become a catalyst for determination, and the obstacles she had encountered had strengthened her character. She understood that success was not simply the result of talent, but of persistence, courage, and the willingness to remain true to oneself. Over time, her legacy began to take shape. Her music, her story, and her dedication became a source of inspiration for aspiring musicians and anyone striving to overcome challenges. She recognized that her journey had a greater purpose than personal achievement. It was about motivating others to pursue their dreams, to face adversity with courage, and to find their voice through hard work and passion. The impact she made extended far beyond the notes she played, touching hearts and lives in ways that could not be measured. As she continued to perform and grow, she maintained a balance between ambition and authenticity. She embraced new opportunities, challenges, and collaborations while keeping her passion for music at the core of her life. Each performance became an expression of her journey, a testament to her growth, and a celebration of the resilience and dedication that had brought her to this point. She understood that true success was not a destination, but a continuous process of learning, sharing, and evolving. She also learned to appreciate the small, quiet moments, the solitary practice sessions, the private reflection on progress, and the simple joy of creating music. These moments grounded her, reminding her of where she had started and the journey she had undertaken. They provided perspective, ensuring that her accomplishments were celebrated with humility and that her focus remained on the music itself rather than external validation. Through mentoring, performing, and inspiring others, she realized that her story was now larger than her own experiences. It was a story that could give hope to those who doubted themselves, motivation to those facing obstacles, and reassurance to those striving to express themselves authentically. She understood that her journey, which began with a single step at a small piano, had grown into a legacy that could influence lives and inspire change. In the end, she recognized that she had truly changed everything, not by defeating someone else, not by seeking approval, but by embracing her passion, persevering through struggles, and remaining authentic to herself. Her journey was a reminder that anyone, regardless of circumstance or initial setbacks, could achieve remarkable growth and impact by believing in themselves and committing fully to their dreams. Her life had become a testament to resilience, courage, and the transformative power of passion and dedication.